Overlord. Something that me and my friends haven't spoken about in quite a while. And honestly, it's kind of funny looking back at season 1, because season 1 is the most tamed season out of all 4 seasons, because the deeper we go, the darker it gets. So I, Green Warrior 1091, along with Riven Warlock, will be covering Overlord Season 1. Because why the hell not? Let's throw Overlord into the mix because I think it's going to be fun. So let us begin. For Overlord Season 1, both the opening and ending in terms of songs and visuals are pretty interesting in the sense that for the opening at the very least, it definitely gives off this adventurer vibe, fast-paced, intense, and immediate tone that the series is going for. Considering that the anime is kind of just fast-pacing of, oh, Ainz is now in a whole new world. He's now has to take care of his NPCs that are now real and have their own like sentience of sorts. He's now dealing with new people, new things. Like, it's just this whole brand newness that the opening gives out, which I personally like. It feels like this upbeat thing, which is where I say it's a bit of a lie, because Overlord is a lot more darker than the opening gives it. Now, in terms of the ending, like I say, visuals, perfect. And I feel like these visuals fit a lot more with the lyrics and the fact that this is all on Albedo's thoughts. A lot of the lyrics, I feel like this can be a video of its own in terms of what the lyrics are kind of going over, and for the most part, to sum it all up, it's definitely Albedo's feelings on the matter, especially towards Ainz, considering he messed with her code and all that. But it is such a vibey song to the point that you can kind of put it on repeat, but it's definitely one hell of an ending because it's focused on Albedo, a character that was affected by Ainz. For the story of Overlord, I must say that it is probably interesting because I'm going to sum it up into 3 parts. The getting to know everything, so the introduction, the hero, quote-unquote, and then the traitor, quote-unquote. You'll understand as we go through. For our introductory to everything, it is interesting that we begin the series at Yggdrasil, the popular MMO game that Momonga, the guild leader of Ainz Ooal Gown, was, as well as his friend Hirohiro, who was there, but obviously this was the only time we'll ever see him in this whole thing. But yeah, because the whole servers are shutting down, which, you know, I kind of have had experience with something similar to that. Let's just say it's bittersweet. And just as Ainz was ready to just say goodbye to the game and be like, all right, guess that's the end of an era, it unironically is. But at the same time, this is the end of something but beginning of a new thing, which would be Ainz being in the actual game per se, because he is Momonga himself. The player is Momonga. And before all of this, keep in mind that Momonga had messed around with the settings for Albedo, and to just be madly in love with him out of literally just shits and giggles. It was not supposed to be something malicious or taking it seriously. No, he did it by complete just, the servers are going to end, so, you know, let's just have some fun. We're going to have some fun here. And then once, these people are real, we get some, obviously, anime shenanigans. And, yeah, Momonga's completely he's caught off guard by the fact that it's all real now. And yeah, we get to meet all of the floor guardians for the most part. Like, this is just introduction to everything. Not only just to that, But obviously the next episode goes a little more, but it definitely introduces us into the characters that we're going to see the most in through this series, as well as the new world. Now, there is something we must note, is Momonga going outside along with Demiurge and being like, speaking on his interest on world domination. And this is something that Demiurge has held on to for probably the entire fucking series, and it's Momonga's fault for that. But whatever. Moving on. So yeah, we get to the whole village stuff. We're still in the phase 1 section, moving in this slightly into phase 2, but we don't get to phase 2 until episode 5. But episode 3 and 4 are essentially still introducing Momonga, although now we can address him as Ainz Ooal Gown, into the whole new world. He is basically learning of the world. He is doing stuff. He is keeping himself from revealing that he's an undead. And yeah, we get to meet Gassiv Stronov. He's pretty cool. He is a pretty fun character in my opinion. But that's not character, this is story. And story-wise, he's still pretty badass. So yeah, the main first village that Momonga, that Ainz Ooal Gown had essentially started his adventure in this new world, is Carne Village. That's where all of this began for him. Because he essentially saved Enri and Nemu, two characters that are extremely close to a character called Neferia, which we meet in our second phase that we're going to move on to. Now, for our second phase of this story, we have Ainz and Narberal, or Gamma, disguising themselves as Momon and Nabe, the adventurers. And essentially, to sum this all up, it's basically hero stuff if Ainz is going the busted hero route. Because in the end of phase 1, we literally see how busted he is when he's fighting against someone who would technically be a season 1 main antagonist, like I guess if you can say a commander level, or henchman to essentially a higher boss, and he just wiped the floor with him. So with the second phase, essentially is Momon and Nabe. They basically are with they meet the Swords of Darkness, and they get offered a job, and that job is to protect Neferia. And Neferia is important because he is essentially tied to Carne Village, which obviously Ainz saved that village. So it all connects. As well as showing us the main antagonists of this little arc, per se. And that's a killer by Clementine and a what the hell is his name? Kajit del Badentel. The fuck kind of name is that? I'm just gonna call you Old Man. The old undead man. Necromancer. Let's just call him a necromancer by his title. So basically the necromancer and Clementine are antagonists. And let me tell you, if you think that this was gonna have a happy ending and it was gonna be completely power of friendship, yeah, fuck power of friendship for this series. Everyone gets fucked if you're not part of under Nazarick. So yeah, the Swords of Darkness got completely brutalized and killed by Clementine, and obviously Ainz grew an attachment to them. Although, funnily enough, Nabe didn't. I mean, why would she? She's very cold towards humans. So yeah, after the Swords of Darkness were completely beaten the shit up and tortured and killed, and Neferia was captured by Clementine, and the Necromancer using his mana, or using him to essentially do whatever shenanigans he's up to, this actually proves more strategically better for Ainz, because now he can prove that Momon is higher tier level than what he was, which was the early adventurer status. And yeah, eventually, once they stop holding back, like Ainz and Gamma, like, they do their shit. Clementine, the sadistic woman with interesting shots, gets her shit wrecked so badly That, I mean, look, this death by hug, that's probably the biggest mercy you'll get, because I can guarantee you, Ainz could probably have found an even more damning way to kill her. But I think this was just toying with her and just killing her in such a interesting method. And then, obviously, Gamma just does her shit and destroys the necromancer with like little difficulty. Like it's pretty funny kind of viewing it back, just how busted they really were for this world. But all right, moving on to the next and our final phase of this season. Editor's note here. So I did forgot to mention something important about the second phase. So let's call this phase 2.5. Kingdom Hearts 2.5, phase 2.5. Anyway, not fucking around a little. So there is an important character that Momon and Navi like recruit into the Nazarick territory, and that is essentially the wise king of the forest, also known as Hamsuk. The giant hamster, essentially. I'm sorry if I'm fucking up the name. Ah, yes, I'll put the fucking name how it said in the goddamn thing to show. But anyway, Hamsuk is important to this because he definitely plays a big role. But I wanted to at least make a note that his story relevance is more important in the later seasons because it's more a pet of Momon now. And it's just interesting that, they essentially stole a creature and now have it as their own pet, which makes me just think of Pokemon. But moving on. So while the events of Ainz and Gamma were happening, we have Shaltir, Bloodfallen, and Sebas. They're on their own mission in regards to gathering information on the new world, since clearly they're going to need more shit than what they've been currently dealing with. Because they need information. Information is key, everyone. But during this, situations happen. They do encounter Brain Unglas, an important character for future reference for like different later seasons. But he does face a Shaltir. He is one of the strongest underneath Gazif and completely is humiliated by Shaltir. To the point where, she essentially just shows that he's pathetic. And I mean, maybe for human standards, he's like strong, but for anything that really matters, he is jack shit. But so he runs away. Shaltir's like constantly, because of all the blood that she's like sniffing and gathering, like she's a vampire, and enough blood like that would probably get to your head and you'd lose control, which leads into a specific problem. Shaltir goes AWOL essentially. She loses control, goes into her crazy-ass form, and she goes on a rampage. Now, she does notice someone who has something that Ainz had, since she was able to question this person. She, obviously being given that little potion, it kind of makes her think, wait, why did she add it? Was she directed by Ainz, or was it through connections? All of this eventually leads to her realizing that there is someone who was like far away, who was watching everything, so she goes right after them, and it leads to, her kind of being attacked. So essentially getting into another fight. After this whole mess happens, essentially, Ainz would be alerted to this, and I mean, they are able to at least find Shaltir. The problem is that once they do, Ainz attempts to free Shaltir from her state with a super tier item, I believe that's the term, and it fails. And that's eventually because he immediately realizes the only thing that can prevent that is a world item. Now, how the hell did this happen? Well, as I kind of went a little before, a few like knights and such from like a whole different action that we're not going to get into because they're not 100% relevant. They kind of are, like the Slain Theocracy, which is the main kingdom they come from, are technically important to this because, I mean, they're the ones that tried to brainwash Shaltir, and that completely backfired because the spell was cut halfway through. Now, for the Shaltir problem, Ainz goes to take care of that on his own, which, I mean, for the Floor Guardians, like, Demiurge doesn't want him to go fight, that this is the Floor Guardians' problems. But Ainz here, like, it shows his, like, despite being the fucking villains, he does care for his subjects and doesn't want them fighting amongst themselves or even killing each other, because it's like he's the father and they're his children. Like, he doesn't want that. And Albedo obviously doesn't want him to go, because if he dies, then all of their creators are dead by this point. Like, they view Ainz as the only one who cared for them because the others disappeared, which brings it to a whole different topic of, well, you know, understanding of things. But yeah, so Ainz goes. Obviously, Demiurge is super fucking pissed that they managed to, that Albedo tricked him and essentially allowed Ainz to go and fight. And yeah, Ainz puts up a fight, shows how much of a badass he is. He went with no fucking gear, just pure skill, and completely fucked over Shaltir. It's just, it is stuff like this that makes Overlord interesting. More or less because this is a player versus NPC, and the player will usually win if they know what the fuck they're doing. And Shaltir is no pushover either. She is one hell of a fighter to deal with, considering that she guards like the first 3 floors. Like, she is pretty fucking OP in her own right, because it would take probably all the Floor Guardians to beat her. But Ainz showed why he's the boss, why he is to be the leader of Nazarick. To conclude on this story thing, Ainz's goal of just being in this whole new world, whole new things to deal with, as well as essentially growth from more into a leader position. Because keep in mind, he is no tactician like Demiurge. He definitely is not like deceitful for most of the time. It's just Demiurge misinterpreting his things. But when it comes down to fighting, like, the dude knows what the fuck he's doing. And it is impressive. As well as the story kind of showing us, like, Ainz, this is just the first steps of trying to reconcile, hoping that he can find maybe his friends in the new world. Like, the story was made for those that miss their groups, miss hanging out with their friends, and hoping that maybe someone else is there. Maybe some other players from Yggdrasil. Maybe his friends from Yggdrasil are in this world. Like, that is the thing, discovering, quite literally. But yeah, story, I mean, it's the first season, and even then, it's still good. So, a fucking 9 out of 10. Alright, for this section, I'm gonna let Riven Warlock take it away. He's going to talk about characters. Go ahead.
Greetings and salutations, all. It's Riven the Warlock again. Nice to meet you all. Here to talk about one of our favorite subjects, Overlord. So I figured we'd start with the big man himself, Ainz. Or should we call him Momonga? Also known by his moniker as the Raven Black Hero to some. But in all seriousness, all of you know him as the Guildmaster of the Guild Ainz Ooal Gown, and the one who stayed behind among the Supreme Beings. In terms of his stats, he's super built in magic amount, and the amount of spells he knows is greater than any of the other Supreme Beings. In this video, we're going to be focusing on Season 1, fresh from Office Drone to Supreme Overlord, into a brand new world. In Season 1, it's very much we get to see him still as his human self. You see a lot of that. Him trying to do good by the memories of his friends and live by their creeds and his human nature. But despite that, he is aware that all of those emotions are slowly dying in him. Because he notices almost right away how just staring at blood as the villagers that we come to love and know in Car Village just do not affect him in any way, shape, or form. The biggest thing about Momonga, Ainz, in Season 1 is him discovering more about himself in this new role that he's playing, and how this isn't just a game. When he dishes out orders to explore the world, and him getting into those situations with, like, Clementine discovering our good boy, Inferior, and then he has to save him. He could have been ahead of that and saw it coming, but he was unaware. It was all about testing himself and seeing the limits of their strength, Season 1. And he didn't really start taking any of it seriously until Shaltir was taken, and the sheer anxiety and fear that there was someone else with a world item scared him to his core, to the point that he freaked out and showed his cards in front of Albedo. I don't want to go into super detail about his backstory here, or even the fact of who he was with Ainz Ooal Gown, because we don't really go into that here in Season 1. We see more of that in Season 2, and we see him share those big, innocent moments of his friends all getting on to one of another and talking about what quests they were going to go on. We don't see a lot of that until later seasons, when he starts to reminisce more and more and more. We just see his interactions with each of the NPCs and imagine how he's talking to each of his friends, like how Sebas is so mirror-like to how Touch Me was, and how that just having him look at him made him remember how Touch Me saved his life. Unrealistically speaking, that is, game-wise. And that's what made him reach out to save that town. He's very much led by his memories and past bonds and emotions, despite them constantly being suppressed. There isn't a lot more to say the Ainz other than probably Momon and the brilliant mistake that he is. Momon being a hero to be, and a secret spy, and a golden figure for humanity to look at, while secretly being probably their biggest downfall as well. It's something to keep in mind for the future that Momon stands for. Momonga as a character is very, well, I don't know if you can call him deep or not. He is deep, but not in the ways that most deep characters are. And he's one of the few isekai protagonists that tends to really dive into their darker sides and their worst tendencies. One of the two biggest moments that happened for Ainz in Season 1, well, let's say 3, would one be the killing of the Archangel, the slaying of Clementine with a nice big bear hug, and of course the final clash with Fallen Down on Shaltir. Those were our 3 big examples in showing of his power, obviously Shaltir being the biggest one, and I'll go into that in more detail when we get to Shaltir's section. The next character we'll be speaking of tonight is Albedo, being the leader of the Floor Guardians, and the one who deeply loves Ainz, albeit changed. She's an important character to keep in mind because of how deeply she loves Ainz and how she was affected by her own loneliness, is why she is just so insistent on being with him at all times. In Season 1, the biggest thing to focus on her is her obviously hatred towards humans and stalwart support of Ainz no matter the cost. Even the moment that we see Shaltir get turned, she is the first to say, oh right, she's obviously betrayed you and cannot be redeemed, so we will kill her. Just being the first sign of the kind of person that Albedo is. She will bend over backwards and do anything for Ainz, no matter what, even behind his back. She's extremely intelligent, being the second, well, let's say third smartest NPC in all of Nazarick. The other two being, of course, Demiurge, and even though it's not shown, the smartest NPC in all of Nazarick, of course, is our one and only Pandora's actor. Now, they don't talk about this a lot in Season 1, but Albedo does have two sisters, being Negretto and Rebetto, which we'll go into in later seasons. The biggest thing to keep in mind about Albedo in Season 1 is that she very much just shows off how much of a manager she is and how much Ainz's tampering has affected her, and the fact that she is just absolutely in love with Ainz. There's also the fact that we can talk about her gear and setup. She's built to be a tank, and her particular setup was set up so she can just tank tons and tons of physical damage and absorb hits until her role was just to take hits until one of the Supreme Being's guild members could get to her. She was not made to finish off enemies. She was an endurance match to the death. And you see that with her gear set. She also has, they don't talk about it in Season 1, but she is clearly holding it, a very special world item, Gagungagap. It's a staff with a floating black sphere, and this particular world item basically has the ability of mass destruction. Not in terms of damage per se, but like terrain and item. It's just like anything that isn't beings, it can cause great destruction. It's a very different item than some of the others we've seen in the series. Than like Ainz's item that he always keeps in his chest, or depiction of nature and society, or any of the others. I guess the last thing to say about Season 1 Albedo is the fact that her obsession with Ainz is definitely shown to be a point of concern by the end of it, and she is just utterly unconcerned with the other Supreme Being. Well, no, I say that. In the Treasury, she was definitely very concerned with the fact that there was golems of the other Supreme Beings, but that was more out of the fact of seeing her own creator for a minute, and the fact that it was just statues of the dead, and Ainz talking about himself being a part of that, like he was going to leave, and that absolutely terrified her, because they are absolutely afraid that Ainz will leave them for them being worthless. I think that's about all we can talk about Season 1 Albedo, though. On to the next. The next two we'll be talking about is Aura and Mare, Bellafiore and Bellafiora. The twins didn't get a whole lot of action in Season 1, other than, Aura being sent out to survey the forest and capture animals of use, and Mare obviously covering the tomb in dirt and changing the terrain. Outside of that and the original meeting with them, the two didn't get a whole lot of attention. We did get to see them using the world items to watch over Ainz at a distance during the end of the season, and even though they showed it poorly, Aura interfering in the fight, distracting Shaltir with her debuffs to affect Shaltir's mind, which is absolutely crazy that she was able to do that at all. There just wasn't a lot of notable things they did other than bicker with the other floor guardians, do their individual parts in the beginning, and being present towards the end of Season 1. Showing off the world items and how they're willing to sacrifice their lives for them. We get more in depth with Aura and Mare in later seasons, which I'll talk about them more later, because when talking about those two, we need to talk about their particular relationship with the others, particularly Shaltir and their creator, Buku Buku Chagama. The reason for this is just they act differently with them because of Shaltir's creator, Peroncino, is the sister of brother of Buku Buku Chagama. And I feel like we could talk about it here, but I bet we'll get more out of it in Season 2 when we spend more time with them. So for now, this is all I can share. Our good man Brain Unglaus. In Season 1, he's mostly remembered as the mercenary working for a bunch of bandits, who unfortunately ran into our oh-so-kind Shoutier Bloodfallen. Using all of his strength, boosting himself with magic oils, potions, and a series of other things to push his strength to the maximum of his capability, flung away by a single pinky finger. But in all seriousness, Brang was a prodigy who fought Gazef to almost equal footing back when they were younger, in a tournament to get the right to learn from a very famous individual where they would then learn a very specific skill. However, Brain lost that when he lost to Gazif's fourfold slash of light at the time. From then, he learned that move and dropped out of his family even more so to follow the path of strength wherever it may lead him. That led him into getting in with some unfortunate individuals there, finding himself working for bandits. Lucrative for him, sure, but definitely not the most honorable gig that he could have chosen. And even more unfortunately brought him into contact with Shoutier, where it broke his mind and left him basically with nothing left but to be a sewer rat of sorts in a back alley waiting for Gazif to find him. We'll be going into the rest of the known floor guardians, being Cocytus and Demiurge, for they had little to do in Season 1. Cocytus being two notable things, being showing up at the meeting on the 6th floor and showing off his ice powers a little bit, doting over the fact that he could be an uncle, and then later stopping Demiurge from interfering with Ainz's plan to one-on-one Shoutier. Demiurge is similar, getting orders from Ainz to start remastering Nazarick's security systems and a myriad of other projects that he just started to force upon him. All culminating in the end of Season 1's he wants to go interfere with the fight, and Cocytus and Albedo forcing him to stay and watch the fight. These two definitely show off more of their abilities in Season 2, so there's not much to say about them here. However, you already get the sense of what their personalities are like. Cocytus is very honor-bound, and duty is his number one priority. His loyalty is to the Supreme Beings and no one else. Demiurge is similar, though his personality being far more sadistic and his intelligence being his biggest point of notoriety. And not to mention, he was the one who was present as Ainz said he wanted to take over the world. And oh boy, did that influence Demiurge significantly. Again, we'll get into that in later seasons, but for Season 1, that's all we can really talk about right now. We can talk about their creators, being the warrior Takamikazuchi, being Cocytus's creator, and Demiurge's creator being Overlord Odal. He has this odd name and it throws me through a loop sometimes. Anyways, the biggest thing is, Ulbert was super loved playing into the I'm a villain and we are villains, so I'm going to be the evilest super villain, which is why Demiurge is just uber villain energy and just oozes that on a constant basis. Hence the happy farm. Gazif Strolnov. We all know him, of course, as one of the first people outside of Nazarick that Ainz met, other than the people in the village that he saved. Gazif Strolnov is known as the chief warrior of the Kingdom of Riestes and personal bodyguard to King Ramposa III. Now, we met Strolnov in Karn Village, of course, where he was working to do his duty as the chief warrior and protect the people of his country against the members of the, well, We haven't gotten into that yet. I don't know if I should. Well, the kingdom. The super religious kingdom. Not the sacred kingdom. The main points that we need to focus on when it comes to Gazeth was his introduction, where he fought with Ainz, made peace with him, and made a sort of, I don't know if you want to call it a friendship, but an acquaintanceship of respect. They both respected each other very deeply and shared it. When they parted, he made him a promise that he would introduce him to the king one day and give back his great debt of saving his life. Towards the end of the series, it was mostly just him talking to Brain Unglas, finding him in the gutter.
Editor's note here, I would also like to bring up that Gazeth is a mad lad. Like, the dude is capable of fighting. Like, he was put in a position for this season that he was in a lose situation. His opponents were just super strong. And despite how many times they kept knocking him down, the dude was ready to die like a badass. And if it wasn't for Ainz, yeah, he would have died. But it is commendable how much he stood his ground regardless of the odds, showing that, yeah, this guy is a badass.
Inferior Bolliard, our oh-so-important potion maker, alchemist, however you wish to address him. A timid, calm, shy boy who's deeply in love with a girl from Karn, and has a very particular talent to be able to use any magical item without any training. He has a very important role in the beginning of our Season 1 when he asks Ainz and the Swords of Darkness to guide him to Karn to gather potion herbs, where his true goal was to find out more about Ainz and the potion that he wielded. Of course, one thing led to another, and Inferior was kidnapped by Clementine. And I think one of the more major points we got to focus about Inferior is the fact that he is probably the only person smart enough to realize who Ainz was under the helmet. Of course, that did play to his advantage later on and has only, forced us to really keep an eye on him and make use of his talents. I look forward to see what else we do with Inferior in the future. The next of the individuals we're talking about is the last of our, in Season 1, known floor guardians, being Shoutier Bloodfallen. Created by Peroncino, the sniper, and younger brother of Buku Buku Chagama, one of the closest friends of Ainz. The thing about Shoutier that you need to remember is that she very much reflects her creator, which is why she is so obsessed with other activities. Mostly you see that she's a bit of a pervert and flaunts that in many ways. Right off the bat in Season 1, we see the kind of person she is, and that very much reflects on how Peroncino created her. But the biggest thing about Shoutier is not her personality, but her skills. She is without a doubt the strongest of the floor guardians, considering the fact that she does watch the first, second, and third floor, which is more than any of the other guardians. She was built to be able to take on players and survive. Heck, she has a revival item just to keep going. Her abilities are perfect for that close-range combat to mess up magic casters and just keep on fighting. And she's so well balanced. There used to be this diagram between the powers being Sebes, Cocytus, Albedo, and Shoutier for the strongest of the floor guardians. Sebes being a counter for Albedo, while Albedo was a counter for Cocytus, and Cocytus overpowering Sebes. But all of them wouldn't be a match for Shoutier because she is just that cut above the rest, and how she was made and to just utterly dominate the competition between the floor guardians, that is. However, her personality does affect her, as we see in Season 1, how she's extremely vain, utterly uncautious, and tends to give in to her blood frenzy, which puts her into this blind rage and ends up losing her mind to the world item Fall of King and Country, which is very unfortunate for her and obviously starts this grudge match with this unknown individual that we know to be the Sacred Kingdom and Ainz. I think the biggest part of Season 1 was Shaltir, and the fact that we get to see her hunt down Brain, interact with the other NPCs almost as much as Ainz, and all culminating in the big fight with Ainz. She's without a doubt the character that was fleshed out the most. And we talked about how she was basically the most well-known NPC to Ainz, being the fact that Pararoncino was Ainz's best friend. And they knew each other so well, he was there for her creation. With the myriad of different spells that he had to ensue in a cogtail of magic to fool and outsmart her to the point that she was weak enough to use all of her abilities and misuse her strength. I think, yeah, that pretty much covers all the big points involving Shaltir Season 1.
Thank you, Riven Warlock, for helping me with this part. And now then, viewer, let's move on to the next section. Okay, so in terms of antagonists, there's no overarching antagonist, unless you want to say that the Theocracy are, considering that they're the reason that Shaltir was semi-brainwashed. But if I were to put it, I mean, the first arc being the whole New World thing, I mean, I guess this character, the leader of the ones trying to kill Gaziv, could be the antagonist of the first arc, but I mostly see him as an obstacle, if anything, because, I mean, he doesn't really show as much of an actual threat. And then the second one, I mean, it's clearly Clementine with Momon, per se, even though, I mean, the second Ainz, like, dropped the Momon thing and actually fought as Ainz. I mean, she didn't even stood a chance. He didn't even try to use any of his magic. He literally killed her through a hug. So, I mean, Clementine's not to be underestimated, though. Like, she is pretty much a threat, considering she was part of the high secret group of the Theocracy. So she was up there. It's just, it sucks because she ended up fighting Ainz, and that was like the worst matchup she could have gotten, because it was only a matter of time before Ainz dropped the facade and killed her, or killed her as Momon. Like, either way, it would have happened. And then obviously the whole brainwashing thing and Shaltir. Now, here's the thing. Shaltir is more of just obviously trying to... They're going to have to beat her so they can undo the brainwashing and stuff. However, this is probably the most serious Ainz has gotten in an actual fight throughout the whole series. This fight alone is probably Ainz's most toughest fight, considering that Shaltir is pretty strong. She's able to keep up, if anything, fight against players. And even then, it would probably take all of the Floor Guardians to barely beat her. And yeah, so in terms of threats, Shaltir, unironically, is the bigger threat out of all of the ones I mentioned. So antagonist is more or less just what's the obstacle for the arc they're in. And then I want to end off this review by just saying, like, Overlord is an interesting story. Like, yes, Season 1 is a lie, because a lot of it is so tamed that when we get to, like, the later seasons, it starts to grow more and more darker. But that also signifies Ainz becoming more and more into the Lich, the Overlord that he is meant to be, especially with the whole dampening his emotions and stuff, and starting to almost not care about a lot of things. So, I mean, it gets dark as we go. So, Season 1 is essentially one of the more lighter tones before we go into a little more darker shit. But overall, it's one hell of a way to start the series.